While I still clutched the folded flag from my wife's funeral, my son tossed car keys on the table and said, "Dad, the ranch is sold $3.2 million cash." My grief froze into rage. But deep in her cedar chest, I found a sealed diary page. Her final words carried a secret powerful enough to destroy every deal they made. They will regret their words and their actions. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat in the quiet of my living room, the walls around me heavy with memories, and I thought back on everything I had given up for the very child who was now plotting to take from me. It wasn't just the money, though that alone could fill a ledger. I paid more than $60,000 in tuition so he could get his degree at a private college. I bought him a brand new Ford when he graduated, $25,000 in cash, because I didn't want him starting adult life with debt hanging over him. I even sold a small piece of land my father had left me, land worth nearly $80,000 at the time, so he could have capital to launch a small business. I gave it all, and I never complained. When he needed me, I was there. I turned down overtime pay just to babysit his newborn son. I stayed up all night fixing his broken-down truck because he couldn't afford a mechanic. I gave, and gave, and gave, and now, to be paid back with betrayal, it stung worse than any knife in the back. What pained me even more were the things no one ever saw. The dinners I skipped so we could pay his bills. I canceled the vacations I had planned with my wife because the kids needed help. My wife and I ate beans and rice for weeks at a time just so he and his wife could host that $30,000 wedding they insisted on. My dreams of learning guitar in retirement never happened because every spare dollar went to saving him from his mistakes. I gave up myself. And now, sitting in the dim glow of the lamp, I realized all that sacrifice had not built loyalty, it had built entitlement, and the bill for my blind love had finally come due. The house was more than bricks and mortar. It was worth $2.8 million, but it carried a weight no bank statement could capture. My wife Helen planted roses along the fence each spring, her hands in the soil, smiling at the neighbors as they walked by. In that backyard, I built a treehouse with my own hands for my grandson Leo. Every nail I hammered into the wood echoed with his laughter. In the living room, the old leather couch still bore the imprint of family gatherings, of Christmas mornings where paper and ribbons littered the floor. But now each of those memories felt twisted, poisoned by greed. When I walked down the hall and looked at the photographs on the wall, I no longer saw warmth. I saw accusations. The wedding picture of my wife and me, once a promise of forever, now reminded me of how she had trusted me to protect our legacy. And here I was, watching it slip into the hands of someone who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle. The silence of the house was deafening. Where there had once been laughter, there was now only the steady tick of the grandfather clock. Every tick reminded me that time was running out, not just for me, but for the legacy Helen and I had built together. It wasn't just the money at stake. It was the story of who we were, the proof that we had worked, loved, and sacrificed together. To lose it would mean to erase her, to erase me, to erase everything we stood for. That house was our life carved in wood and stone, and the thought of signing it away felt like signing my own death certificate. It was while cleaning out Helen's things that I found it. I had opened her closet, still faint with the scent of lavender she loved. On the top shelf was a wooden box, one she had kept since her teenage years. I had seen it before, but never thought much of it. That night, something pushed me to open it. Inside were neatly folded linens, embroidered with her initials, and beneath them, sealed in a yellowing envelope, was a letter. My hands shook as I broke the seal. The words on the page blurred as I read them, my heart pounding louder than the clock in the hall. Helen confessed something she had carried alone. The son I had spent my life sacrificing for was not mine. He was the result of a mistake, a secret she had buried in shame, believing it was best for the family. My breath caught in my throat. The betrayal from my own flesh was already unbearable, but now this, the knowledge that my bloodline was not what I thought was a second wound. I sat back in the chair, clutching the letter. It was like the floor beneath me had collapsed. I felt anger at her for keeping this secret, grief for the years I had lived in a lie, and despair at the realization that everything I thought I knew about my family was broken. But as the storm of emotions raged inside me, one truth emerged. That letter wasn't just a confession, it was a weapon. It was proof that the man trying to rob me had no rightful claim. It was Helen's final way of protecting me, even from beyond the grave, and I would not let her gift go to waste. The days that followed were filled with torment, but also clarity. For the first time in years, I saw things for what they really were. I thought about every time I ignored the warning signs. His arrogance when he asked for money, the way he dismissed me when I suggested caution, my blind eagerness to believe he loved me in return. "Robert," I whispered to myself, "you've been blind for too long." The grief that had paralyzed me began to harden into something else. Resolve. I realized that I had already lost my wife. I could not lose my dignity or my grandson. This betrayal would not end me. Instead, it would wake me. I looked at the letter again and said out loud, though no one else was in the room, "Helen, you carried this burden so I wouldn't have to. Now it's mine to use. I will protect what we built. I swear it." The pain remained, but beneath it burned a new fire. For the first time since the funeral, I felt like I could breathe. One evening, as I sat in the living room staring at my phone, I saw the messages. Dozens of them. My daughter is begging me not to make this messy. My son-in-law is demanding I do the right thing and sign the papers. I scrolled through them, my thumb trembling at first. And then I did something I never thought I could. I deleted them, all of them. No reply, no apology, just silence. Then I turned off the phone and set it face down on the table. That small act felt like a declaration. For the first time, I wasn't bending. I wasn't playing the part of the generous old man who gave until he had nothing left. I was reclaiming my voice. I stood up, and in that moment, I felt taller than I had in years. It wasn't much, but it was the first step toward taking back control. The house was still the same, but I was not. I sat in my old recliner, the one Helen used to tease me about, and for the first time it felt less like comfort and more like exile. The walls were lined with photographs of birthdays, graduations, and Christmas mornings. They should have been sources of joy, but now they mocked me. Every picture seemed to whisper, "You gave everything, and look what it bought you." The tick of the grandfather clock was no longer soothing. It sounded like a countdown to war. Yet even in that suffocating silence, I felt her presence. I turned to the wedding photo on the mantel. Helen's smile looked back at me, calm and unwavering. "Helen," I whispered, "give me strength. I will not let them bury your legacy. I will not let them bury us." My voice cracked, but the vow was clear. For years I thought my role was finished, that I was just an old man waiting for the end. But not anymore. The fight was coming, and I would meet it head on. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. For days after finding Helen's letter, I walked through the house like a shadow, holding her words close to my chest. The shock still stung, but something inside me had shifted. I was no longer the trembling old woman they thought they could push into a nursing home. I was ready to fight. The first step was simple. I picked up the phone and dialed Richard Thompson, my attorney for more than 30 years. My hand didn't shake this time. My voice came out clear, strong, each syllable sharp as a nail. "Richard," I said, "we need to meet, today. It's urgent." Within the hour, I was sitting in his office, the polished oak desk between us, the faint smell of coffee in the air. I laid out the betrayal, the schemes, the letter Helen left behind. He didn't interrupt. He only nodded, his pen moving across his notepad with precision. Finally, he looked up, his eyes steady. "We'll freeze everything," he said. "The savings accounts, the certificates of deposit, the deed on the house. They won't be able to move a cent without your approval." He slid the documents toward me. My fingers, once so unsteady I could barely hold a pen, now moved with purpose. I signed each page, my signature bold, deliberate. With each stroke of the pen, I felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself. When the last paper was signed, Richard leaned back. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly. I nodded. For the first time since Helen's funeral, I believed it. The next morning, I walked into the First National Bank, the same branch where I had deposited my first paycheck nearly 50 years ago. The marble floors gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and the air smelled faintly of polished wood and disinfectant. A young woman at the counter looked up as I approached. She smiled warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Williams. How can we help you today?" Her kindness caught me off guard. For weeks, the only words I'd heard from family were demands, ultimatums, threats. To hear genuine care in a stranger's voice almost broke me. "I need to confirm the freeze on my accounts," I said, my voice steady. She tapped on her keyboard, nodding as she read the screen. "Yes, sir. Your savings and investment accounts totaling $400,000 are now secured. No one but you can touch them." She looked up, concern softening her eyes. "Are you all right, sir? Do you need water?" That question pierced deeper than she knew. My own blood wanted to strip me of everything, yet here was a stranger, asking if I was okay. I swallowed hard. "I'm fine," I said. But inside I thought, better than fine. I'm finally taking back what's mine. When I left the bank, the autumn air felt sharper, cleaner. For the first time in weeks, I walked with my back straight, my steps sure. Each stride carried me closer to justice. It wasn't long before the confrontation I knew was coming arrived. My son-in-law, Jason, showed up at my house one afternoon, uninvited, his confidence spilling into the room like poison gas. He spread out papers across my dining table, charts, spreadsheets, glossy brochures he must have paid someone to design. "We're looking at the future, Dad," he said, using that false intimacy that made my stomach turn. "We can invest the equity from the house, roll the savings into this portfolio. You'll be comfortable in Shady Oaks, and Alicia and I will handle the rest. You won't have to worry about a thing." He said it like he was doing me a favor, like banishing me from my own home and stealing the life Helen and I built with some kind of gift. I kept my face blank, my hands folded neatly on my lap. I nodded at his charts, murmured a non-committal, as though I were the frail old man he thought I was. Inside, every word he spoke I memorized, filing them away like bullets in a chamber. Each arrogant sentence was another piece of evidence against him, another reason to fight harder. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I let him build his case, brick by brick, not realizing that I was the one laying the trap. When he finally left, smug and satisfied, I closed the door softly behind him. Then I whispered to myself, "They think I've lost, but the game has just begun." Oh, Richard called me the following week. His voice was calm, professional, but I caught the edge of excitement underneath. "I dug into Jason's background, Robert. You'll want to hear this." My heart quickened. "What did you find?" There was a pause, then he spoke. "He's drowning in debt, $750,000. Gambling debts. Creditors are circling. He's desperate. That's why he's after your estate." I closed my eyes, the weight of the revelation settling over me like a heavy blanket. Suddenly, everything made sense. The urgency, the pressure, the smug confidence that masked a rotting core. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to joy. Not because of his downfall, but because I finally held the upper hand. Richard sent me the documents, court filings, debt notices, overdue balances, cold, hard proof. I printed them out and placed them in a folder, sliding it into the drawer beside Helen's letter. 2 weapons, waiting for the right moment. That night I sat in the quiet of my study looking at the folder. For the first time in weeks I smiled. "Helen," I whispered into the empty room, "we've got him." Days turned into weeks, and each encounter with Alicia and Jason became a performance. They came over often, circling me like vultures, trying to wear me down. Alicia played the dutiful daughter, bringing casseroles I never touched, her voice syrupy sweet as she reminded me how lonely the nursing home wouldn't be. Jason spoke of opportunities, waving contracts under my nose, assuring me they'd handle the burden of the house. I let them talk. I let them think they were winning. And all the while I prepared. Richard filed protective motions with the court, securing temporary injunctions that kept the property locked down. At the bank, I moved funds into accounts they couldn't access, shielding every dollar. Each signature I made, each form I filed, was a stone in the fortress I was building. And with each step, the fear that once consumed me turned into something else. Confidence, determination, power. I noticed it in small ways. My hands no longer trembled when I signed documents. My voice no longer caught in my throat when I said no. Even my posture changed. I stood taller, straighter, as though the weight of their betrayal had hardened into armor. Every time I looked at Jason across the table, I no longer saw the son-in-law who had once tricked me with his charm. I saw a desperate man scrambling to cover his own sins, and I knew his end was coming. One afternoon, Alicia tried a new tactic. She brought out an old letter Helen had written years ago, a note where she mentioned wanting security for the children. Alicia waved it like a weapon, her eyes flashing. Mom wanted us taken care of. She said it herself. I stared at the paper, then back at her. My voice was steady. Your mother wanted many things, but she also wanted honesty. Tell me, Alicia, is this what she meant? Deceit, manipulation, lies. She flinched, but quickly covered it with indignation. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. If you have to dig through old letters to justify your greed, maybe you've already lost. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. For the first time, she looked unsure, and that, more than anything, told me I was winning. The contrast between them and strangers struck me harder each day. At the bank, at Richard's office, even at the grocery store, people treated me with respect, with kindness. A cashier asked if I needed help carrying bags to the car. A young paralegal in Richard's office brought me coffee, her voice soft as she asked if I was comfortable. These small acts of decency reminded me of what real care looked like, and it made the cruelty of my own blood stand out in sharp relief. How had I blinded myself for so long? How had I mistaken entitlement for love? I realized then that this wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, about refusing to let the people closest to me strip away the last pieces of my life. And I promised myself, they will not win. The day came when Richard placed the final document before me. It was the power of attorney, granting him full legal authority to act on my behalf in protecting the estate. My hand hovered over the pen for a moment. Then, steady as stone, I signed. The sound of the pen scratching across the paper felt like thunder in the room. When I set it down, Richard smiled faintly. "That's it," he said. "The fortress is built. Now we wait for them to make their move." I nodded, my chest swelling with a strange mix of relief and anticipation. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready. The game was in motion, and they didn't even know they had already lost. That night, I sat in my study, the folder of Jason's debts open before me. I thought of Helen, of the roses she planted, of the laughter we once shared in this house. I thought of Alicia as a little girl, holding my hand at the fair, her eyes wide with wonder. And I thought of the way she looked at me now, eyes sharp with greed, her love bought and sold like cheap currency. My heart ached, but my resolve only grew stronger. "They think I'm beaten," I whispered. "But they don't know. They don't know what's coming." I closed the folder, slid it into the drawer, and turned off the light. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. And here is where I pause, looking directly into the camera of memory, reaching out to whoever listens. If you've ever had that moment when the truth hit you like a hammer, when you realized the people you trusted most had betrayed you, comment just one word for me: truth. Because truth, no matter how painful, is the only weapon that cannot be stolen, and it is the weapon I now carry. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. I set the dining table the way Helen used to, slow and steady, one plate at a time, silverware aligned, napkins folded into neat rectangles. The afternoon light slid across the hardwood floor like honey. It should have felt warm. It felt like the air before a storm. I had called it a family meeting and asked everyone to be here by 6. No excuses. Alicia answered with a clipped, "Fine." Jason didn't bother to speak, just texted 3 thumbs up and a clock. My neighbor, Mr. Johnson, said he would come by for a minute if I needed him. Richard Thompson, my lawyer of 30 years, promised to arrive with a folder I already knew by heart. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, every frame on the wall watching the door, every tick of the old grandfather clock counting down to the truth. They came early, which told me they were nervous. Alicia walked in first, perfume too sweet, smile too bright, a folder hugged to her chest. Jason followed, voice loud, shoulders square, as if volume was the same thing as authority. He placed a glossy binder on the table, full of charts and color tabs, the same binder he had tried to sell me on last time projected returns, nesting alternatives, Cost savings if I transition to care. He said the word care as if I were a burden. I showed them to the chairs. No one touched the iced tea. No one touched the bread. The clock ticked. Outside, a breeze pushed the rose bush against the window, a soft scrape that set my teeth on edge. I'll start, I said, because I wanted to control the first word. I've heard talk about selling this house. The house your mother and I built. The house is now worth $2.8 million. Alicia looked at the table. Color rose in her neck. Jason leaned back like a man certain the game was already won. I reached into the drawer and set down a neat stack of papers. These are the court orders Richard filed. The deed is frozen. The accounts are frozen. No transfers. No liens. No signatures without me. Alicia's face went pale, then blotchy. Jason cleared his throat and smiled that salesman smile that always felt 5 degrees too wide. You didn't need to do that, Dad, he said. We have a plan. We can invest the equity, move you into a place with amenities, and get a professional to manage finances. It's safer. You'll be comfortable. Everyone wins. Him. Everyone. That word landed like a pebble dropped down a well. I let the echo fade. Everyone but the truth, I said. Everyone but the woman who planted those roses outside and trusted me to keep this home standing. The door opened and Richard stepped in, calm, tie straight, eyes clear. He set his briefcase on the sideboard and nodded to me. Evening. Behind him came Mr. Johnson, his shoulders stooped from years of roofing, his handshake still strong. He held a small paper bag with a peach pie his wife had baked. He didn't look at Alicia or Jason. He looked at me. I'll be quick, he said. Just wanted to say my piece. I've lived next door for 22 years. I see who takes out the trash. I see who waters the lawn. I see who sits on the porch at night when the air is finally quiet. Your father is steady. He's sharp. He knows what he's doing. Don't let anyone say different. He squeezed my shoulder and left the pie on the counter. The kitchen filled with the smell of cinnamon and butter. For a second, my throat closed. Kindness from a neighbor. Silence from my own child. The contrast cut like glass. Richard opened his folder and laid out documents one by one, as patient as a surgeon. He started small, because that's how you peel a lie. At the edges. First, he said, for the record, tuition payments of $60,000 came directly from Robert's savings account ending in 1432. Here are the bank statements. He slid them across the table. Next, the Ford purchased in 2008 for $25,000 was paid in cash, again from Robert's account. Bill of sale. Another page fluttered down. Alicia shifted in her chair. Jason stared at a point over Richard's shoulder, jaw tight. And here, Richard continued, the deed to the land sold for $80,000 to fund the first business, recorded with the county, and the $30,000 wedding line itemized across vendors, also paid by Robert. Each fact was a drop of water, small on its own, relentless in rhythm. Alicia whispered that I had wanted to help, that I had insisted. Richard nodded. He did help, and his generosity is not a transfer of ownership, nor is it an admission of incapacity. It is generosity. The law knows the difference. Jason laughed then, a short, sharp sound. We're not here to relitigate the past. We're here to talk about the future. We brought a proposal. He tapped the glossy binder. We sell the house at 2.8. We roll the cash into annuities. We allocate $400,000 for long-term care. We will secure placement at Shady Oaks by the end of the month. This is the rational path. Rational, I repeated, the word cold on my tongue. I prefer another word, respect. My voice didn't rise. I didn't need it to. Richard folded his hands. The clock ticked. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked, then quieted. I let the silence stretch until even Jason's eyes flicked to the floor. That's when the doorbell rang. A young man stood there in a black shirt and tie, a catering badge clipped to his pocket. He held a clipboard and looked lost. Sir, I'm sorry, he said. I think the office sent me to the wrong address. I'm supposed to confirm the dinner service for a Leo Williams, allergies noted, but the instruction I received says, do not verify the child's plate. We never ignore allergies. I thought someone should know. His face flushed as he realized he had walked into the middle of something raw. I took the clipboard and read the note. The words were ugly in their casual cruelty. Do not verify. In my house, at my table, where Leo played with toy cars on this floor, while Helen clapped her hands and laughed. The room changed temperature. The air thinned. Who told you that? I asked. He swallowed. A woman, on the phone. She said she was family. She sounded rushed. She said to make it simple. Alicia started to speak and stopped. Jason's eyes went narrow. The young man looked from face to face, then down at his shoes. We don't do that, he said quietly. We always check the plates. It's our policy. I'm sorry for the confusion. It's not your fault, I told him. Thank you for coming in person. I signed his confirmation, struck a line through the offensive instruction, and wrote in block letters, always verify the child's plate. The kid nodded and left, relief written across his shoulders. The door clicked shut. I turned back to the table. No one spoke. The clock counted. Now, I said, about rational paths. Richard took a breath, flipped to another section of his folder, and slid a stack of papers toward Jason. Public records, he said. $750,000 in gambling debt, past due, collection actions pending, threatened liens. You have been courting this estate for one reason, cash. The color drained from Jason's face. He snapped that the numbers were taken out of context, that he was negotiating, that it was under control. Richard didn't blink. No, it isn't, he said, because you've been using company loans to pay personal markers. We have statements, we have emails, we have a pattern. Alicia turned to her husband, voice small for the first time that night. You told me it was just a bump, Jason said to calm down, said they were being dramatic, said everything would be fine if I would just sign. He tried to pass me a pen, palms up, eyes bright with a salesman's plea. I didn't take it. I leaned back. I looked at the photos on the wall, at the wedding picture where Helen's smile was softer than any light, at the Christmas morning where Alicia sat cross-legged under the tree, curls tangled, cheeks pink from the fire. The ache came, then steadied. I reached into the side drawer, where I had placed the one thing I had sworn to keep safe until the moment it mattered most. The wooden box Helen had loved since she was a girl. I set it on the table. The lid creaked open. The envelope waited. I did not want to use this, I said, but you left me no choice. I slid the letter out and placed it on the table. Helen wrote this. She sealed it. She kept it. She asked me to read it when I needed to remember what was true. Tonight, I need the truth. I read. My voice didn't shake. My eyes did. Helen's words walked into the room like she never left. She told the story I had carried since the afternoon I found the letter in her cedar chest. She told of a mistake and a secret, of a child who was not mine by blood, of a shame she buried because she feared it would break us, and of the love that built our family anyway. She wrote that blood matters for inheritance under the trust our attorney drafted long ago, and that a codicil signed, notarized, witnessed, clarified the line of succession. She wrote a name, Leo. She wrote a sentence that cut and healed at once. The boy who plays with the red car is your blood. Protect him. Alicia stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. You're saying I'm not... The words stuck. She looked at the letter, then at me, then at the door, as if a different life stood waiting outside if she could just reach it. Jason said it was manipulative. He said letters could be forged. Richard slid a second document across the table. The notarized codicil, dated, sealed, and recorded. He placed a third. The results of a DNA test Helen had done years ago when fear gnawed at her. She hadn't told me then. She must have shaken when she held the envelope. The test confirmed what the letter explained. Alicia's eyes glazed. She said it didn't change anything. She said family is more than blood. She said I had raised her. I let that truth land. It was real. It mattered. And because it mattered, the next truth mattered as well. I raised you, I said. I paid for you. I fed you. I loved you. That does not give you the right to sell me or sell this house, to cover your husband's debts. The words came easier now, like water over a stone smoothed by time. Richard set down the last document, an amendment to the revocable living trust. The trust now places the residence and the liquid accounts into a spendthrift provision for the benefit of Leo Williams, he said. With Robert as trustee, and Richard Thompson as successor trustee. Guardianship provisions are included. Transfers are barred without court approval. A lis pendens is recorded with the county. Anyone who tries to touch this asset will trip an alarm loud enough to wake a judge at midnight. Jason lunged for the documents. Richard's hand moved first. Calm, efficient. He gathered the pages back into order. Alicia's voice rose, hot and raw. You can't do this. You can't take everything and give it to a child. She looked at the letter again, then at Jason, then at me. You are cruel, she said. After everything. I thought of beans and rice, tuition checks, new car keys, the way her little hand once fit in mine. Cruel. The word echoed and went flat against the walls. I didn't throw it back. I let it fall. Mr. Johnson knocked once and stepped back in, as if he had heard the pitch of the room change from across the hedge. He kept his voice gentle. I'll keep it short, he said. I've watched him mow for hours in July heat. I've watched him shovel when his back ached. He comes to the neighborhood watch, remembers names, and brings the coffee. He's clear. He's steady. He does not need a home he didn't choose. He nodded to me, then to Richard, and retreated to his house under the porch light. The kitchen still smelled like peach pie. It grounded me. Jason started to sweat. He called his broker on speaker, his voice a swagger of panic. He asked if liens could be placed quickly, if transfers could be forced. The broker asked if he had authority. Richard answered for him. He does not. Jason hung up. He called someone else. A collector, by the sound of him, the tone like sandpaper, impatient, hungry. Jason whispered numbers into the phone. The room heard anyway. Alicia watched him, something dawning slow and awful. You said it was handled, she hissed. You said it was temporary. He told her to stop talking. She didn't. Is this why you pushed so hard? Is this why you needed the house sold now? He told her to trust him. She looked at me. She didn't look like a villain then. She looked like a person watching the floor open under her feet. The rift between them widened with each second. Lies tend to do that when they hit the air and light. I kept my voice calm. We're not done. I opened Richard's briefcase and took out a small recorder. We hadn't needed it, but we had it, because Richard prepares for weather and for war. I pressed play. Jason's voice filled the room. A recording from the afternoon he swaggered through this house, not knowing the living room camera caught every word. We sell quick. We split what we can before the old man changes his mind, he had said to Alicia in the foyer. Once he's in the home, he won't even notice. It's cleaner this way. Alicia's recorded answer was a whisper. Just get it done. I stopped the recording. The room swayed, then steadied. Alicia put a hand to her mouth. Jason said the recording was illegal. Richard explained that, in this state, a person may record conversations in their own home. Jason's throat worked, but no words came out that could fix what the truth had broken. I never wanted a fight, I said, because it was true. I wanted peace. I wanted Sundays with football on low, Leo under the table coloring, your mother humming to herself in the kitchen. I wanted the smell of roses after rain. I wanted all of us, at one table, one family. But you tried to turn my life into a ledger. You tried to move me like a piece on a board. You tried to buy time with my house. My hands were steady. My breath didn't hitch. I looked at the photo of Helen again and felt, for the first time since she left, something like her hand on my shoulder. That ends tonight. Oh, Richard summarized. Not as a flourish, but as a record. The freeze orders, the trust amendment, the guardianship clause naming me primary and him successor, the lis pendens recorded with the county, the spendthrift provisions sealing assets from creditors, the documented debts of $750,000, the recorded conversation, the notarized codicil, the DNA report, facts in a line, stones in a wall. Alicia cried then, for real. Not the brittle tears of strategy, but the cracked sound grief makes when it finally stops pretending to be anger. She said she didn't know about the debts. Jason said she did. She said he lied. He said she pushed. They turned on each other in the language of people who built a house on sand and were surprised when the tide came. You told me everything was settled. You said your contact could file the lien. You said the nursing home had a room. You said he would agree. Words like stones thrown and thrown and thrown. Jason stood so fast his chair tipped. He demanded the binder back, demanded the letters back, demanded a pen. He said he would sue. He said he would expose me as incompetent, that he would bring a doctor who would sign anything for a fee. Richard reached calmly into the briefcase and placed a fresh report on the table. The evaluation from Dr. Patel, independent, thorough, concluding that I was oriented, capable, competent to manage my affairs. He placed another, affidavits from neighbors and friends about my daily habits, my routines, my church attendance, my volunteer work, my steady hand. Each document turned Jason's threats into paper birds that couldn't fly. He sank back down. His voice got smaller. Alicia stared at the letter, at the DNA report, at the shape of her life as it was and as it might have been. She said something I will hear when I am very old, and the house is quiet again. I didn't think it would go this far. I answered the only way I could. It always goes this far when greed does the driving? I stood. The act felt ceremonial, like rising in church when the hymn begins. By the terms of the trust, by the codicil your mother signed, by the law of this state, the estate transfers to the benefit of Leo Williams, I said. I will steward it while I breathe. Richard will take it when I cannot. You will not touch it. You will not manage it. You will not sell it. And when Leo is a man, he will decide how to honor the people who loved him. My voice did not waver. The clock struck 7, each chime a bright nail in wood. Jason's jaw worked as he tried to speak, but the words collapsed in his mouth. Alicia whispered that I was cruel again, softer now, as if even the accusation was tired. Richard closed the folder with a quiet click that somehow sounded like a gavel. The pie cooled on the counter. The house exhaled. Outside, the porch light drew a circle on the steps. I told them I would not throw them out. I told them I could not keep them close. You will get a letter, I said, with the terms under which we might speak again. Honesty will be one. Respect will be another. Alicia nodded without looking up. Jason gathered his glossy binder, and the pen no one had taken. At the door, he turned, as if there were one more angle he could try, one more lever he could pull. He found none. He left first. Alicia lingered by the roses, fingers brushing the petals Helen planted. She whispered, "I didn't know," to herself. Then she walked down the steps and into a night that did not promise comfort. I locked the door because I have always locked the door. I turned off the dining room light. The room looked different in shadow, softer, the edges less sharp. Richard put a hand on my arm. "You did well," he said. "You did what needed to be done." I poured 2 glasses of water, and we stood in the kitchen, 2 old men with tired feet, breathing in the smell of peach and butter and cinnamon. Mr. Johnson's porch light blinked off. The neighborhood settled. For the first time in too long, my body remembered what it felt like not to brace. Before Richard left, he handed me one more envelope. "Filed this afternoon," he said. The clerk stamped it at 3:27. "The trust is perfected. The county knows. The bank knows. Anyone who tries to touch a dime will feel the wire." I nodded, the relief not loud, not bright, but deep. "Thank you," I said. He shook my hand. "You did the hard part." When he was gone, I sat at the table, the same place where the glossy binder had gleamed and then gone dull. I looked at Helen's letter again. I ran my finger along her handwriting like a road I could still walk. I thought of the little boy with the red toy car, the way he made it hum under his breath as he drove it across the table, tire marks and flour dust from cookies cooling on a rack. I thought of Leo's laugh, so bright it made the dog perk up from sleep. I thought of how close we had come to a house emptied of those sounds, a house cold as a bank vault. I thought of the catering note, and felt a fresh wave of anger rise and then pass. Some things I will not let live in this house. The air felt cleaner for having said that out loud. I walked to the front window and looked out at the yard. The roses were dark, silhouettes against the porch light. I spoke so softly that only the glass heard me. "Helen, I kept my promise." The old clock answered with its slow beat. In that rhythm, I felt a new chapter shuffle its pages. Not easy, not simple, but mine, ours, protected finally by more than hope. If you are listening to this and you know the feeling of being dismissed, of being told you don't understand your own life, of being pushed aside in your own home, I want you to hear me now. The feeling is heavy. It's lonely. It makes the air thinner. It makes every room smaller. It is hard, isn't it? If you believe every person deserves dignity, if you believe age does not erase wisdom or rights, comment just one word for me: dignity. Now watch what we do with it. Watch how we change everything that tried to break us. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. The morning after the storm of that family meeting, the house felt different. It was the same walls, the same furniture, the same grandfather clock ticking in the corner, but the weight of secrets and shouting had lifted. It was like the echo of thunder after a storm finally fades and all you're left with is the smell of wet earth. For the first time in years, I woke up knowing I had nothing to hide from. No more waiting for the other shoe to drop. The truth had been spoken, the papers signed, and the law on my side. My daughter and her husband had lost their grip on the estate, and more than that, they had lost the illusion of control. Still, I knew I couldn't live in that house forever. Every corner carried both memory and betrayal. I stood in the living room, sunlight falling across the old rug, and I whispered to Helen's photograph, "It's time. I need a fresh start." And with those words, I called Richard and told him to proceed with the listing. Within 3 weeks, the house sold for just under $2.9 million. It was the right decision. I watched strangers walk through, pointing at the high ceilings and the rose garden Helen planted, and instead of feeling pain, I felt relief. This was no longer their trap, no longer the place where greed had tried to strangle me. I moved into a modest condo across from a little city park. The condo cost about $200,000, nothing extravagant, but it gave me what I needed: peace. The windows looked out on trees that shifted with the seasons. In the mornings, I could hear children laughing as they walked to school. Every day I walked Leo to class, his small hand wrapped in mine, his backpack bouncing on his shoulders. Those moments were worth more than any house, any bank account. They were proof that love still had roots in my family. The change was not just physical, it was emotional. At night, instead of lying awake wondering how my own blood could scheme against me, I slept soundly. I joined the local veterans group, men and women who had seen storms of their own. We sat together in folding chairs, told stories, sometimes laughed so hard our stomachs hurt, and sometimes fell quiet when memory demanded silence. In their company, I remembered what it felt like to belong. I wasn't a man to be discarded. I was a man still standing. But as my life grew lighter, theirs grew darker. Word spread fast in our town. People found out about Jason's debts, the failed schemes, the frozen accounts. Alicia and Jason lost their standing. They had to move into a rented apartment on the edge of town, a cramped place with peeling paint and no garden. Jason faced investigations from creditors who had waited too long for payment. Alicia stopped showing her face at the social clubs she once loved, because whispers followed her wherever she went. The very people she had once bragged to about her plans now crossed the street to avoid her. That's the thing about betrayal. It never just rots the target. It rots the betrayer from the inside out. One evening, months later, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was shaky, almost desperate. It was from Alicia. She wrote that she was sorry, that she hadn't known the full extent of Jason's lies, that she never wanted things to go so far. She said she wished we could go back to when she was a little girl, when I carried her on my shoulders to the county fair. For a moment, the memory tugged at me, but then I folded the letter and slid it into a drawer. I didn't respond. I realized forgiveness didn't mean opening the door again. It meant choosing not to carry the bitterness with me anymore. I didn't need her words to heal. I had already healed. I used part of the proceeds from the house, $200,000, to start a scholarship fund in Helen's name. The Helen Williams Scholarship went to kids from families who could barely keep the lights on but who dreamed of college. The first year, 3 students received help. When I handed out the checks at the community center, I thought of Helen's handwriting, her careful notes on grocery lists, her quiet sacrifices that no one ever noticed. This was how her legacy would live, not through the greed of children who tried to erase her memory, but through new lives being lifted up. Peace, I discovered, was not just sitting in a quiet room. It was action. It was giving. It was planting something you might never see grow, but trusting that it will. On Saturdays, I started tending a small patch of soil in the community garden. My hands, calloused and wrinkled, still knew how to coax green from dirt. Leo came with me digging with a plastic shovel, his laughter rising above the hum of bees. Sometimes a neighbor stopped to talk, offering advice about tomatoes or telling me about their grandchildren. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I was looking forward. As for Jason, the last I heard, he was working odd jobs, trying to patch together money to pay off debts that never stopped multiplying. Alicia stayed with him, but they lived small, shadows of the people they had once pretended to be. One of my neighbors mentioned seeing her in the grocery store, avoiding eye contact, her cart filled with generic brands. They had been stripped of their illusions, and in their place was a hard truth they could not escape. One afternoon I sat on a bench in the park, watching the leaves tumble across the grass. A little girl I didn't know ran up to me, clutching a wildflower. She smiled shyly and placed it in my hand before darting back to her mother. I looked down at the flower, fragile, imperfect, yet beautiful in its simplicity, and I whispered to myself, I don't need them anymore. I have myself, and I have Leo. The weight of years of betrayal lifted in that single breath. The lessons were clear, and they weren't just for me. For parents, I would say this. Love must have boundaries. Without them, love becomes a breeding ground for entitlement. Sacrifice is noble, but sacrifice without limits teaches children that taking is easier than giving. For children, I would say, ingratitude is a poison. It eats at your soul and leaves you with nothing but regret and empty hands. And for everyone in this world, I would remind you, character and truth are the only treasures no one can steal. Money can vanish. Houses can be sold. But the way you live, the honesty you keep, that is your real inheritance. Now every morning when I wake up and pull back the curtains, I feel it in my bones. Freedom. I don't live in a mansion, but in a home filled with peace. I don't have a table heavy with false company, but I have laughter from a child who still believes the world is good, and that is more than enough. So I'll leave you with this. Every betrayal, as heavy as it feels, carries a lesson. Mine taught me that blood is not the same as love, and that boundaries are as important as breath. Parents, protect your hearts, but teach respect. Children, honor the hands that fed you. And all of us, in this modern world full of greed and noise, must remember dignity is not negotiable. If you've been listening, I want to hear from you. Tell me, what lesson do you take from my story? Which truth will you carry into your own life? Comment on the lesson you hold on to, because sharing it might be the first step to changing your world. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.